Hey, this is Kevin Carr picking up where I left off, part two. Who is Kevin Carr? I was saying I had got my first job. It was built on me purely putting my passion out there. Didn't even know I was going for a job. I was just talking to a gentleman who was in for an interview. He had gotten a big job. He was looking for talent, and I didn't even know he was looking. He literally told my boss, I like this guy's energy. I want him to interview for a job. He may get it, he may not, but I just liked the way he came across. Basically, he said he could teach me whatever I needed to know as long as I was trainable. So I went for it. Got it, and went from studying something I had been in college for 4 years, and then all of a sudden I was in this new field that had a lot of connections to some of my personal things that had happened in my life with my family, my brother who was an athlete, and now I was getting ready to get into the business side of working with athletes on the developing side, meaning helping them be better students, better performers in the classroom, better leaders in the community, better developers of their own personal growth and their academic pursuits to possibly be the best students they could possibly be. So as an athletic academic advisor, I really was not prepared as I would have been. I felt I was more built for football and basketball. And I had been, grown up in communities where that was our thing. But now I was the advisor for tennis and golf. I mean, track and field, cross country. These are sports that are just unorthodox with the exception of track. I knew nothing about tennis. I knew nothing about cross country. I knew nothing about golf, but yet I was charged to lead these communities. And one of the things I didn't do well was take that challenge on. I can remember not really knowing the tennis guys and ladies, so I went out there and did the best I could. The same thing with cross country and the same thing with track. I thought I was doing reasonably well in those areas, but the one area I really struggled was golf, and that was a challenge area for me because I knew no one who knew anything about golf. And there I was advising, 10 or 15 guys on a team, and I was supposed to be their advisor. And I think my first, couple months, I really didn't show that I was into the job. So for me, that was something that I generally was involved and very passionate, but golf it wasn't really registering for me. So I went out to the golf course and nobody came to see me. Nobody, wanted to meet with me. And the golf coach was like, hey man, it's your second or third time out here. Why these guys don't really get you? And I could recall, he said, you're not really putting forth the best energy. They can tell in the way you pursue and work with them that you're not really into it. And you need to really figure out whether or not you want to do this job, because I need somebody to help these guys be better students. And to me, if you're not going to be that person, then maybe we need to think about, reassigning you to somewhere, and I can talk to your boss about that. And that really struck me. He literally just called me out. He was like, look, you're not doing what I think you could be doing in this position. And that let me know who I was. If it was going in my favor, then I was all in it. But if it was something a little new, I hadn't really thought about not being into it. This was the first time. It was my first job. I was hired to do this job. And I really got an awakening there. And it kind of told me who I was in a sense of, even if you don't know something, even if you're not comfortable with something, you should not just give it, the best chance to learn. Give it more of an opportunity, pursue it, put something into it, and then eventually you may find out that you end up liking it. And that's what I did. And there's a lot more to that one, But that was my first, introduction of not being, 100% into something professionally, and literally met a challenge that I had to overcome to get to know that sport. And it was really, telling. So to me, I think everybody, gets those moments and find out who you are and who you aren't. And for me, that was a moment where I needed to step my game up to become a little bit better in the job that I was hired for. After realizing that, I began to get immersed into the field, helping all student athletes. I began to get opportunities to develop new programs and careers and community. And it worked out really well for me. I thought, for the most part, that job was something that I really was passionate about doing. It worked out for me very well, and I ended up in the next couple of years really growing. During that time, there was so many things going on that I learned how to recruit better, and then eventually I got the opportunity to transition into the recruiting space of football and basketball, which was where I thought I wanted to be, and I actually earned that opportunity to be in that space. So I didn't start out exactly where I wanted, but after several years, I got a chance to develop myself and to get into the space that I wanted to do. And that was due to time and energy and effort. And my boss saw that I was giving a bunch of effort, and he eventually gave me the opportunity to recruit football and basketball. And that helped me as a professional grow and develop and get more opportunities and be seen on a higher plane. He also made me the lead person over diversity for our department. I was the only person of color, and he championed me to find out what we could do better, where we could be, more inclusive. And I was the face sort of the department, so I went out across the country, went to different conferences, learned different training tools and methods, and I brought them back into the department and shared them with my colleagues. We picked up some training from a company back then called Franklin Covey. Anybody know about Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? I literally learned that in my first job on how to be a Covey expert and trainer. And then I picked up Covey's 4 roles of leadership, and that was another training I picked up. So I began to become more of a organizer and a planner, more of a developer of people, and this began to shape, who's Kevin Carr as well. Someone who really enjoyed training and developing people to the point where I developed a class in my first job. I was able to develop some community programs and develop one of the initiatives that is still today at Florida State, the FSU Life Skills Program for student athletes. The exact names may have evolved since then, but for the most part, that was a foundational program that I got a chance to recognize was a gap in our development of athletes. And then I decided to bring that to the forefront, and it worked out extremely, extremely well for my career. It was another accolade that allowed us to earn different honors, being one of the first 41 schools in that program, but also Athletic Management Magazine named us one of the top departments for supporting student athletes off the field, and that was a big honor. So within 3 years, all these things happened, and on top of that, our football team had won its first national championship, got to work with a lot of, very talented student athletes at the time who went on to play pro in football and basketball and baseball. And I would say that, it was an epic winning, also a chance to go to the Elite 8 as a basketball program. So it just was a lot of cool firsts. And for me, it couldn't have been a better first job. My walk from there allowed me to still think about, I was happy to some degree doing athlete development, but I wanted to kind of scratch this itch in the business world. So I had gotten recommended by a friend who knew me from Orlando, where I had grown up, and she put my name out there, and this new company was starting with a gentleman. It was called Inroads, and Inroads was doing a startup in Orlando, where I was from. And it was a really important time in my family, because my mom was fairly ill and we needed somebody to move back and take care of her. So The job was a good timing because I needed to be there to help my mom, but at the same time I needed to work. So this brand new company, to me, was looking for a corporate services manager and director of training. I thought I wanted to be in the business world, so I left the job that I was doing fairly well at, but I still wanted to try. So I became somewhat a entrepreneur, leaving the confines of collegiate athletics and going into the private sector nonprofit world with En-ROADS. En-ROADS' mission was to develop and place talented minority youth in business and industry and prepare them for corporate and community leadership. I still remember that mission to this day because it was important for me, and it was a requirement of my boss during that time that you don't leave on your first day until you know the mission. So man, they ingrained that into me. I think I was there till about 8:30 at night trying to remember that mission to develop and place talented minorities, youth, and business and industry, prepare them for corporate and community leadership. Over and over and over and over till I got it. And I think that really showed me at the time too how important a mission was to a business. If you don't know your mission, you can't possibly guide the organization. You can't guide yourself. You don't know exactly what you're pursuing. I thought that was really a novel thing they did to the employees. Although it was kind of stressful at the time, it was something that I thought was really important. So there I was, brand new, me, two other people in a startup in Orlando. We had gotten big companies get behind us. Essentially, we were high-level youth headhunters. We were searching really some of the best companies in the world to find minority talent. This was way back in the late 90s, so you can imagine all this stuff about diversity now has really come to a head. But we were back then even well aware of the need for it, and these companies were too. So imagine me, somewhere like 26 or something, and I'm the corporate services manager and director of training and development, and I'm walking into Coca-Cola, IBM, Motorola, Siemens Semiconductors, Lockheed Martin, Electronic and Missiles, Boeing, NASA, Orlando Magic, Disney. And I'm like, hey, I'm your talent development person. I'm gonna help you find high potential minority youth to come in and do executive high level internships with the hope of them working with you for the next 3 or 4 summers, and that you convert them into full-time employees. That way you don't have to go out and find minority talent. We found it, we've developed it, we've trained it. And for me, that was like a little bit of finding a needle in the haystacks, because you had to go far and wide to find, for one position, almost 5 to 10 students for them to interview, so they knew they found the right student. So imagine finding a specific, intern for NASA, what that person had to be doing in high school and college to fit into an internship. So at the end of the freshman year, they were ready to go. So this is really, really like important work, because you were trying to find kids who were super serious about engineering, all 4 types: mechanical, electrical, civil, supply chain, all these different things. You had to find kids who were into biomedical and biology and robotics, and finding students who were super high achievers in business who wanted to be with some of the biggest banks in the world, and they were Wall Street potential, and you had to find them. And they had to be African American, Latinx, Asian, Indigenous, Native American students, etc., Indian, you name it. We were literally, scouring all the Southeast to find people, and that was my job, to find these super talented kids coming out of high school, or if they were in college. So I was visiting HBCUs and talking to those department heads in those departments for engineering and business and biology and sciences and stuff like that. So it was a very tough job. And then at the same time, I had to train these students to prepare them to go into corporate America. Think about you as an 18-year-old and your job was to figure out how to fit into predominantly majority company, and you came from an environment that was, predominantly African American or Latinx or Asian or Indian, and you go into a majority white corporate culture. It's a huge leap. And that was my job, to prepare them for that leap. And we would make sure that they understood, how to be professional in those environments. So there was training on professionalism, training on culture, corporate culture, training on leadership, training on communication skills, presentation skills, understanding how to work in teams, work in diverse teams, understanding how to, do project management, all that, somewhere between 18 and, 16 and 20 years of age, you were teaching these things to young people. This was a very advanced curriculum that they had to not only be in school, but sometimes on the weekends they would come and meet me in Orlando, drive from their schools and get training. And during the summer, they had a lot of training before they would go into their internships. So it was a very, very challenging job, but it also was challenging because you had to meet corporate demands. You had to train the corporate people to be ready to accept and work with these diverse students. So some of the corporate people inside the company weren't really equipped to work with young African Americans, young Latinx. So you had to train the students on one side, train the professionals on another side, and we were the go-between to make sure all of it came together. So to me, it was like just really, really unique work, but it was challenging work. I enjoyed it, but it was very stressful. It was like you had to meet your sales quotas to find the best interns. You also had to meet the delivery and demands of the companies. So it was just one of those jobs that you were almost doing two jobs in one, headhunting, and then you were training, developing not only students, but the corporate to make sure the relationship, you manage the relationship for it to get convergent. The goal was 3 to 4 years at a company, the same company every year. So by the time that student was going into their senior year, they had a job offer from that company. That company knew that they had that student sewn up, and they had years invested in them because they paid them very well every summer. I forgot to mention that. And they paid us to make sure that student came back. So it was a huge commitment, by the company paying the student, paying us to manage this very elite relationship with the hope of them converting that student into a beginning banker, beginning scientist, beginning engineer, beginning electronics and missiles type of person. So this is, extremely, extremely, elite level work and hard sciences, high level business. And that was my job. And I can tell you it was demanding, managing student athletes, corporate parents. That job was a stressful job. Believe it or not, you thought, working for youth and diversity and helping meet the corporate gap of diverse people working in the workplace was a beautiful thing, and it was, but it was so demanding because we were a brand new company and we were trying to grow. So it really challenged who I was to put everything I had. And at some point I wasn't as successful as I thought I was going to be in it. And I began to, realize that it was a huge undertaking that maybe I wasn't prepared for. My first job was excellent, had a great experience. The second job wasn't going as well in the business world that I thought I would be cut out for. So I ended up still staying in touch with the people on the sports side. And then one day, my boss came in and said, "Look, man, I don't think this is working out well, with us. You're good, but you're not quite getting these sales goals. And, what do I need to do to help you?" And he was fair, I think. I just wasn't built, I thought, for sales and constant sales and constant follow-up and constant, developing talent where I knew I had to hit these certain numbers in order to get into the higher levels of management. I just wasn't doing it. And I had a real coming to reconciliation for myself. And then I came in one day and said, look, my goals and the company goals are no longer compatible. I don't think it's a good fit. And man, I ended up, resigning for the position. It was one of those things where I never thought I would be in that spot. So within 2 years, I was literally not working now. And this is a really tough time. And I'll talk about that, why it was tough later at another time. But one of the things that I realized was, my corporate journey in hardcore corporate, private sector, nonprofit didn't go well. Luckily for me, I was a relationship guy. I had been getting calls all through the time I was with Inroads about opportunities. It took me about 4 months. And then after 4 months, I ended up getting 4 different offers for 4 different schools: UCF, Alabama, the NCAA, and Michigan State. So I ended up visiting all Michigan State and University of Florida, and over the phone UCF and Alabama, and I ended up choosing Michigan State. It was the biggest opportunity of all of those. It was the one that was the furthest away. I was in Orlando, and at the time I was, in the midst of, being super serious with my then fiance, my wife, and we were getting ready to get married. So all these things were happening. I was out of a job for months, thinking, man, I'm off track here. I may not get married. Then at the same time, I was looking at how do I get back into the job race of finding a job so I would have some income, so I wouldn't come into a marriage, unemployed. And then, as God would have it, so I was blessed with 4 opportunities after 4 months of nothing. 4 opportunities all at once within like a week or 2-week time span. So I ended up, like I said, we chose Michigan State. They brought me up at the warmest time of year in July. If you haven't been to Michigan in July, it's amazing. It's like 70s, maybe high 80s here and there at that time. And we ended up, doing a great visit, and I ended up choosing Michigan State. And I became the first assistant director of student athlete support services and director of student athlete academic center, named after the first African-American female on that female building, named after an athlete's mother, Steve Smith. He had donated several $1 million to name a building after his mother, Clara Bell Smith. She was a proponent of education for him while he was a student athlete at Michigan State. She unfortunately passed of cancer, and he wanted to do something significant to remember her, and the university got behind him on a concept. And I got to lead that building, and it was full of resources to develop student athletes to their highest potential. So I came in not only directing a brand new development program for student athletes, but also directing a facility, multi-million-dollar facility, about almost $8 million. So that was a huge, at 28, 29, I was getting to lead an entire development program, almost 700 athletes, brand new facility, Big Ten school, new opportunity, and literally moved to the Midwest. Never had lived there. And my wife and I, we just really went at it, and just didn't look back. Again, the Inroads position didn't work out. I respectfully resigned because I didn't want that position not to be fulfilled by somebody who really could do the job. And then, the Lord blessed me with this new opportunity, and man, it just was everything and then some. It was super hard to move to a brand new part of the country. Michigan, particularly East Lansing, is one of the greatest top 10 places in the country. So to go from Orlando, Florida, to now gray Michigan, mentally it was depressing. So at times when I thought it was be nice and warm in Florida, my mind was tricking me saying it's gonna be warm today, but outside I was buttoned up with boots, jacket, and I slipped on the ice my first day going to work and was flat on my back on the ground. And then all of a sudden I said, man, I am in Michigan, Kevin, you gotta get with it, because the weather is gonna go to another level of cold and another level of cold and another level of cold. And if you don't realize where you're at, you're gonna be mentally depressed. So I realized at that time I needed to shift my mindset and get ready for this new environment that I was in, the Big Ten Conference, Michigan, Michigan State. I was going to be a first time in this new position, newly created for me. So I had a lot of things to worry about besides, being a little upset about the weather and falling flat on my back because of black ice. And it hadn't even really got super cold. So I went to work and realized that I had an uphill battle. There were a lot of people there who were extremely amazing to work with, and there were some challenges. I had come into a situation where this building wasn't quite built, so we were sharing spaces all over campus until it got ready, but the program still had to be developed. And I was coming in trying to organize it. There were people who were already there doing a lot of the same things, so I had to try to put it all together. And I found out who I was in that, meaning that I had to really bridge how to bring together things that people were doing that weren't necessarily going bad, but my job was to enhance that. So I got a little pushback. Hey, you're the one fuzzy guy. You're supposed to bring all these development programs. I wonder if you're gonna be able to do it because this person's already doing that, person's already doing it, that person's already doing that. You're gonna have to figure out how to organize all this because people have been doing this 10, 20, 15 years before you even got here, so they ain't gonna just roll over. So I knew, as a young, up and coming leader that one of the things I had to do was build, community. So in order to build community, you gotta listen. What's been going on before you got there, respect those people in those positions and respect what already was there, and not to say I'm coming in and just gonna take over. So I took an approach, and that might sound like logic, but it wasn't always like that, where, people sometimes won't take their time to just come over with takeover spirit. And for me, I wanted to build a community that people would support what I was doing. So I took my time for the first, 6 months to a year, listening, learning, and then moved into an enhancement strategy and got some cheerleaders on campus. What I mean by cheerleaders, people who really got behind me and wanted to work after knowing me and really realized the sincerity in which I wanted to operate. I ended up coming up with a newer strategy of building a board and building an advisory team who were full of seasoned people on campus and all types of roles. And we all came together with the mission of developing this best student athlete program in the country. Lots of things had to happen. There were so many different aspects. I had to win coaches over, win administrators over, win the student athletes over, win the communities over, win corporate dollars and corporate partners over. Just really understanding that I had to also make sure I was there for my family. My wife had moved obviously with me and she was there alone. So it was a period where we had to figure out how to live in a whole different part of the country while I was developing this really day and night job, because once student athletes were done with practice, we would do a lot of development with athletes in the programs at night, study halls, speakers. So it was like a can't see to can't see job for me, but I knew that's what it took. And after a number of years, great coaches, I got a chance to work with Nick Saban, who was there at the time as the head coach of football and trying to turn that program around. Got to work with Tom Izzo, who's still there to this day, and we were successful in winning a championship there. In basketball with the what they call the Flintstones back then, and I'll go into how all that kind of came about at another time. And then Ron Mason, the hockey coach, legendary coach there at the time, and went to a Frozen Four with him. So now I'm within, left Florida State, left Inroads, and I'm at Michigan State and having finally a great run. And, the thing that really I came for was to build this program. And then over the years, just putting together a lot of great initiatives and support from community, corporate dollars, community resources, community partners, building programs with 2 and 3 student athletes up to 5 to 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 to 100. We were building great things. We ended up getting recognized by the Division I Athletic Directors Program Excellence Award for having one of the best life skills program in the country, along with Notre Dame. And that was literally like winning the Heisman Trophy for my profession. It was sort of the top creme de la creme of what you aspire to be if you were doing the work that I was doing. So to get that award within a 5-year period, to go from nothing to building up something like that, to having left a job at Inroads where it wasn't exactly the fit, and realized I had to pick up the pieces and start back over, but I had good enough relationships to get back in. And really, after 5 years of working hard at Michigan State, we were on top. It was just amazing. And I was really blessed as a result of that. So much so that I got a call from a friend who worked for the WNBA and said, hey, this next opportunity may be something you want to consider, and it's got your name all over it. And I said, what do you mean? I had networked with her. She was at Michigan State, and I'd always called her, one day I want to be in player development. One day I want to do player development at the pro level. And she was in basketball operations and events and such. She had moved on from Michigan State and went to the WNBA. And one of the things I learned was how to just stay in contact. I was fairly good at being a connector and staying connected to good people. And I told her, I said, hey, if you see any jobs at the league office in development or community, give me a shout. And I called her maybe every other month, every 6 weeks or so. And one day she called me and said, hey, there's a job with your name on it. And that was gratifying because I'd worked really hard to stay in contact with her. So it was interesting on how that part with her really worked out, just to stay connected with people and people who were really good and helpful, work hard at that. And I think that's something that's a lost art when you don't connect in, and let people know what your dreams and aspirations are. Sometimes they'll help you, but if you don't let them know what they are and stay in touch and keep, knocking the dust off it, or keep knocking at the door, tell them, hey, I'm here, I'm still interested, then, they don't know, because lives are busy and people are very, into what they're doing. So for me, that was, a huge opportunity to do that. So the job at the NBA was a new league starting called the NBA Development League, which is now the NBA G League. And they were starting about 8 teams in the Southeast. And they needed a community relations director, and she thought I was really good fit for that. So they gave me a call, and I was at work, I'll never forget it. The lady calls me and said, hey, this is, so-and-so from the NBA. And I was like, NBA? Quit playing. And I kind of hung up. And she called back, and she said, hey, this is so-and-so from the NBA. I said, who from the NBA? She's like, this is so-and-so, and we're wanting to talk to you. You've been recommended by someone to work here. And I said, oh, okay. So I got myself together, kind of shook it off, and then I went into interview mode, and I said, yes, I'd love to talk to you. And they said, hey, we'd like to set up a call, talk to you about this new position. And the next day they called me back. I went through it, did 2 or 3 calls, talked with the main person, and eventually over the phone got offered the job. And guess what? I ended up not taking that job because my wife was like, hey, we just had this baby, we just bought a house, it's like nice here, it's real easy. I don't know if we need to like take it up a notch. And I was like, why wouldn't? This is like, as close as player development to pro level as I think I'm gonna get. I know it's community relations, but I think I can work my way into player development. So she ended up saying, I think we ought to think about it. And then I called NBA back and I said, nah, not gonna do it. And that was really, the case there. And so she ended up saying, if they really, really want you, they may come back. I think she was thinking about it. My wife was thinking that, it still could be a good opportunity. So we ended up just basically, just passing on it. And then a little while passed and the NBA didn't call back. And I was like, dang, man. So I applied for another job. This time I did apply for a job and I didn't get it. So I was like, man, I didn't get the NBA, I didn't get this one. What is it that, is gonna possibly work out for me? And then one day I got another call, but before that, something really epic in the history of America happened. What had happened was I was in class teaching, and then all of a sudden I got a knock on the door, and a student came to the door and said, hey, Mr. Carr, you need to see what's going on TV. It's really important. And I was like, well, I'm teaching a class. What is so important? You'll interrupt my class. And he's like, once you come to the TV, you'll see. And then I look, and it is a live stream telecast from NBC showing a building burning. And then all of a sudden, I saw another, from the left corner, right corner, I saw a plane go into the building. And nobody knew at the time, but America was under attack for 9/11. And it was just, so traumatic even to see that. I can imagine being anywhere in New York. And for that to happen while I was teaching, my entire class, came out where I was, and we had all these TVs in the lobby, and it was showing on that. And obviously I dismissed class, everybody was too distraught. And that really got me thinking that, was it, not in the cards for me to go to New York? Maybe it was the best idea after all, my wife was right. So I ended up just not thinking about it. And then several months later, probably 2.5 months later, I got a call, and it was the NBA. And they said, look, we're still interested in you. We obviously aren't flying due to 9/11, but we still think you're a really good talent. And I was like, wow, they're calling me back. This is, this is divine. So I ended up, doing another round of interviews, and it came out that I was the person. And I said, look, I don't have no problem. You guys, I'm interested. I think the biggest challenge is not gonna be me. It's gonna be my wife. And they were like, what? They were like, oh, okay. So let's do this. Let's do a trip to New York, and obviously we're gonna recruit you, but we're gonna recruit your wife too. And really it was about both of us, making sure it was a fit. And I think that was real important for them to realize that you're gonna have to take, in consideration that, this isn't just my decision, it's a family decision. And that began to let me know how important it was to me to make sure that, my wife was on board, because these were big family decisions. I had a young child as well, and it was going to be important for us to make sure we had all those things in mind. And literally, we came back, still wasn't decided. And then my wife woke up in the middle of the night after we came back. It was a great trip. She said, despite what's going on in New York might be one of the safest places to be because of now the heightened awareness and security that's there. Let's go to New York and see what we're made of. And that was, the opportunity that I had wanted finally had gotten into the pro sports area and gotten into working in community relations, but it was a start. So I got in and I started with the founding team to help develop the NBA Development League. It was the D League at the time, not the G League. And man, I can tell you, that was a crazy experience. You know, corporate, it was professional sports corporate. And it was one of the things that when I first got to New York and I was in corporate housing and I'm finally working to my first job, and I'm walking down the street and I'm walking by, you know, iconic Empire State Building, and I'm walking by Rockefeller Plaza, walking by St. Pat's Cathedral, and I just got emotional, like, you know, just a little welled up inside, because I have been through so long of a journey to get here, and to finally be here was just so magnificent of a feeling as a professional to have accomplished, to get inside the NBA and have a director's level position was pretty impressive considering where I came from. So for me, it was huge. It was huge. So I went to work, and man, I had all these great dreams of this thing working out amazingly, and it was a flop. The Development League was not well received in the South. We couldn't get any traction. I'm telling you, we were in some of the most challenging Tier 3 markets in all the country. We were in Asheville, Fayetteville, Greenville, Huntsville, all the villes, Mobile, not a ville, but you get what I mean. We were in Roanoke, Virginia, trying to grow this brand, Columbus, Georgia, all these sort of small kind of markets. NBA thought it'd be great to grow basketball in the South because it really wasn't as popular as football, and in the Northeast as basketball. So, but we just didn't go about it the right way. We didn't sort of set the teams up, and the market really, it was local flavor. It was all about local people and local being in the community for a long time, and people knowing who you are and you being a part of that community. And we were New Yorkers to them. Although I wasn't from New York, we were New Yorkers to them, and we were coming in, taking over, saying we were going to bring great basketball. And they were used to their fall football, their fall festivals, the traditional things. So bringing in a whole new culture of basketball, bringing in players at the time who certainly were outsiders, not on purpose, but they weren't from there. And we brought in a different type of aspect to the person that traditionally lived there. Often these were majority communities, predominantly white, and the base of players, particularly coming from these teams, were predominantly black. Not that that was a negative in any sort, but it still was a little bit of a culture clash and a culture shock for some. The players certainly weren't used to being in far off places, and sort of out of the norm in the Southeast of where some of them were coming from. So we had a lot of adjustment. We did as much as we could to develop and prepare our players, but still there was, once we left them and developed, train them, they were on their own. And I used to make visits to come and make sure that players were doing well, but we didn't have a person that, like me, at every team, so that often fell on the head coach, assistant coach, community relations director, which we had hired at each of the teams, or the PR director, but they still were trying to adjust themselves. The players were trying to adjust, everybody's trying to adjust. We had hired all these sort of hotshot people from all kinds of different places and different professions, some of them local, some of them, from some of the best schools in the country. And it was just really not working well in those markets. And then on top of that, not working well in some of these far off places in New York itself, even I was adjusting. I'd come from the South originally, and I was living in the Midwest, and now I'm in the Northeast. And to adjust to, being in a corporate culture like the NBA, if you don't know, corporate culture in New York City is corporate culture. The NBA may be a basketball company, but all intents and purposes, a company. It has, security, it has finance, it has legal, it has global marketing partnerships, it has all these aspects to it that really make it unique property, and it can be every bit of corporate than you could imagine. So it wasn't like it was just a basketball court and we have referees running around there. Nah, none like that. You button up, you're dressed, you're looking professional. You don't have to wear a shirt and tie or anything, but you certainly want to look respectable coming to work. So that was, what I ran into. I even ran into some bias and some aggressions and stuff like that. I remember one day, getting there early and someone says, "Hey, what school did you go to? Did you go to Columbia? Did you go to Wharton School of Business? Did you go to Northwestern? Did you go to Harvard or Yale?" And I said, "No, I went to Florida State." I said, "Florida State? How did you get here?" That's a football school. That's a school from the South. Same way you got here. Hard work, knowing people, having a reputation. That preceded me. I interviewed the job and respectfully won it from whoever else I competed with. That's how I got here. So to me, that was an interesting, dynamic to had some bias against me for where I went to school, because I just didn't go to Ivy League school or from a prestigious school like a Stanford or something like that. That was one of the things I thought was really interesting that I experienced right from the jump. But I also would say that, there were some people that didn't care about that, particularly David Stern, the commissioner, who was there for over 32 years. He just wanted to know, was I good? And I remember meeting him in the elevator during the time I was interviewing. He said, "Look, I read about you. I heard you're pretty good. I hope you do a good job. It's not going to be an easy job. So, be ready to work hard." And, so I got good vibes from, the top leader in the whole organization, but despite some people's, mindset about where I was from and where I was educated. So, with that, back with the D League, it was really tough. We went from 8 teams to 6 teams. Now we had lost 2 teams. They just couldn't make it in those markets. And I just remember, really toughing it out and just staying with it. And we had to do a lot of reconfiguring, moving the teams around. We did our studies and realized that the growth in the country was happening in the Southwest. Cities like Austin were going to be a good market for us. We ended up buying some teams from the CBA. So we went with existing teams that had a brand and collapsed them into the G League. And then from there, the league started bouncing back, and we went from 6 teams to 8 to 12. And it was a good sign for the league enough to say, "Hey, we're going to keep this league and you guys are going to keep growing." And I ended up getting the title. In that time during the G League, they actually had moved me from New York City to Greenville, South Carolina, to try to help grow the league back. So we were really doing a lot of stuff we were moving people and everything. There's a huge lesson in that too that I had done, which was to in order to get that move to happen with the NBA, to grow my career, I had to make a move within leaving New York City to go down south to get closer to the teams to try to help build this league. And once we got the league back to about 12 teams, 16 teams or so, they wanted me to come back to New York, and came back to New York and got promoted to senior director, and then vice president shortly thereafter. So my NBA career was going on a good trajectory. Not only was I doing the G League, but now I was doing the NBA. I started doing NBA draft, started doing things like NBA All-Star, all the things that Summer League and pre-draft camps and combines and going to playoffs and finals. I was managing 6 NBA teams in all the development league. So it was a huge, huge responsibility. NBA career, I couldn't tell you, went amazing. I ended up being the first vice president of social responsibility and player programs for the NBA and for the NBA G League. Again, something that I had worked hard for and had a lot of, great opportunity. But for me, it was like something that I just had to like buckle down and just work on, and eventually it worked itself out. So for me, I would say my corporate career, corporate climb, and this is for the climbers. Like, I want to talk to you that I'm going to be really sewing into you all who really may not have a desire to be an entrepreneur like, I'm doing now. And I've told you a little bit about my climb. There's a lot more detail in between that. So I'm not giving you everything today, but I am giving you some aspects that if you want to make it in corporate and you want to climb, whether you're working in government or where you're working in the school system, whether you're working for a small company or you're working in a real estate organization, you're working for our automotive industry, wherever you are, you're working in major markets, my background, I believe, I can share some things that might be able to help you go from where you were at the early stage of your career to mid stage where I was to, a corporate stage where I ended up being and getting to the vice president level and being one of 5 people really in the world who on the NBA side dealt specifically with players and teams about their overall development. So I had to deal with things that were very complex, like lockouts, and where the whole entire league shut down because it was a disagreement between the union and the NBA. Those are very traumatic. Those really exercise a lot of challenge in leadership. I dealt with issues like the malice in the palace, where you had to really imagine how NBA's players' perceptions plummeted and then try to get it back. We developed things like NBA Cares program as a result of that. We had to respond to issues like the Eric Gardner issue that impacted a lot of our players, the I Can't Breathe time in basketball, where the WNBA players actually were very instrumental in making that movement get traction and brought a lot of attention to that, where the NBA players certainly jumped in as well. And I would say that WNBA players are hugely as much, if not more active than NBA players and when dealing with social matters. And then one of the most epic issues was, watching teams come aboard. Bob Johnson had created the Charlotte Bobcats, which eventually now are the Charlotte Hornets, but all that, watched how the NBA brought on a team in Oklahoma City, the Oklahoma City Thunder, being a part of that, all while doing the G League as well. And then one of the more epic issues, the Donald Sterling issue, where he spoke ill of people of color and about fans of color, etc., and that he had tactics and issues around race in his business practices, so much so that the NBA decided to take away a team as part of a group of people who, at a very high level discussed what it is that we need to be about as the NBA and moving forward. And, to Adam Silver's credit and the leadership around him at the time, they all made a tough decision. We all sort of, as a company, had to take a team from an owner. It was nothing like that had ever been done. But I can tell you all the corporate experience that I had and major decisions that impact sport and society, to watch how the NBA grew businesses and be a part of traveling overseas as far as Australia to help, promote basketball, other places, Asia, Alaska, seeing NBA grow its business in Africa as well as growing in Latin America and other places. Just amazing to be part of that. So I believe there's a lot here that I can continue to share to help you make the corporate climb. But that is part of who is Kevin Carr from a corporate business perspective, and I'm hoping to build more on that. So this is who is Kevin D. Carr, and I'm so glad you were able to tune into this. Hopefully you got a lot out of it and continue to grow with me as I grow and sharing, and also learning from you as much as hopefully you will learn and gather some stuff and tips from me. All right, take care. Thank you, and have a great day.